if they're in sales, they need to have a different avenue that they can still hone their skills to where they can be the most effective person possible. And here's the parallel for me. So I am an avid archer. I spend, there's 365 days in a year. I probably spend 250 shooting my bow. So I went from, and I very rarely shoot a rifle. And I will tell you why. I realized that you can be more accurate and closer to, you have to be closer to the game, and you have to be more accurate if you're going to ethically shoot something, whatever you're hunting, right? And the only way to do that is with a bow. And people that know me know I own, and especially my friends, several bows, but I spend a ton of time learning about archery. I spend a ton of time surrounding myself. And I think this will be the key takeaway you need to take away from this. I spend 7 days a year in person with the top archers that I know in the country. And I invite them down to my land in Oklahoma, and we spend 7 days and we bow hunt. In the end of December, we bow hunt, and it's invitation only. We spend a lot of time giving each other grief, but we have archery targets, so not hunting every night. We have tournaments. And if you want to go to a particular place to hunt the next day, you got to win that tournament that night. And we're honing our skills, but we're talking all year. We have a group text there, and all year, some days it has 50 texts, some days it has 2. But we're talking about, hey, did you guys see this? Did you see this that happened? Look at my shot. What am I doing wrong?
Welcome to the Rockstars Rocking podcast, powered by Voluntary Disruption, a show dedicated to people who are crushing their business and life goals. These are bite-sized conversations with leading rock stars in their respective industry who are pumped to share their story to help drive you to the next level. So, are you ready to rock? Speaking of rock stars, here's your host, Eric Silverman.
Hey, rock stars, welcome back to another episode of Rockstars Rocking, where you know it. I say it every week. We only have the number one, the finest, the best of the best rock stars crushing their business, their life, their career goals, and anything and everything in between. And guys, this week is no different, I promise you. Everybody welcome my good friend I've known for many years, back from the Carrier days on his side, Mr. Suave, we should call him, Michael Hart. Employee benefit consultant over at Dillingham Benefits out of the Oklahoma City area. What's up, Michael?
What's up, man? How's it going?
Hey, man, I am just living the dream, hoping and praying that one day I can grow a fancy beard like yours. For those listening on audio only, you got to check out this handsome stud, this son of a bitch. This guy is absolutely the man. Check him out on our YouTube page. He's blushing. His face is turning completely red right now. It's amazing, right?
Oh, man, I love it. I've missed getting to talk to you. We used to have some really good talks. Still do.
Oh, man. So, Michael, look, I met you back in Florida in 2017, when I was honored on stage as winning a Voluntary Advisor of the Year from Employee Benefit Advisor magazine. And our mutual friend and connection, David Contorno, is who introduced us. And I got to tell you, to this day, what I miss most about you being back in the Carrier days is you would pick the best restaurants to wine and dine us brokers. Got to tell you, man, you had an eye for steak and seafood, and maybe just an eye for spending money. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, it's funny you say that, because when I started my previous company, which was a carrier, big carrier, and I worked for them, I think in 4 different states, I learned a long time ago that every time you go to one of those conferences and you're the carrier and you got your booth set up, nobody understands what you do to begin with, you waste a bunch of money and time. And I learned, man, if you can take somebody to a nice restaurant, have a good conversation, heck, half the time you and I didn't even talk about work, you really get to know the person. So we may have spent, I don't work for that company anymore. We may have spent a good chunk of change on dinners, but I always felt like they were well worth it. I got the likes of, I thought about that actually the other day. I got the likes of you. I got Contorno, Rachel Miner, Billy Potter.
All of them.
Trying to think of some other ones. We had Billy Potter in San Diego that we all went out to eat with.
Yep.
We had Felipe. I mean,
oh yeah,
you've had some of the
The list goes
Rachel.
on and on and on.
Yeah, yeah,
Here's the good news though for your former carrier, in case they're listening. I'm sure they will. I'm a cheap date. I don't drink,
sure.
Mike. Right? Am I wrong here? Like you've seen
No,
it live in action. Nobody believes it. I don't drink beer or wine, liquor, nothing. So and I
no.
don't have dessert either. So I'm in for the steak, no sides, and I'm ready to roll. Speaking of the steak, let's talk about the meat of this conversation. I want to get into it, man. Look, you did what most folks from your former days and my current days, you did what nobody does, man. Yeah, there's a handful of folks that do it. I know some good people, but boy, you went to what I would call the dark side, what you probably would have called the dark side 5 years ago, right? You
Yeah,
went from being in the employee funded enhanced benefit, as I like to call it, as the status quo industry still sadly calls it, the voluntary benefits world. You went from leading all of brokerage at a pretty good sized carrier in the Midwest, national presence, of course. You went from there to, you know what? I think I'm going to be a full service medical advisor. I'm just going to go ahead and throw my hat in the ring and try this out for a change. And not only that, this is the crazy part. You didn't do it pre-pandemic. You didn't do it post-pandemic. It's literally the beginning toward the middle of the pandemic. The whole world's shut down. Everybody is getting laid off. And you said, yeah, I'm just going to proactively leave and start something brand new that I've never done before. Walk me through really just the mindset of that decision, because I got to tell you, man, there are folks listening to today's show, and I appreciate them listening, who are carrier reps, like you and I used to be, right? We're both recovering carrier reps. There
yep.
are folks that are currently in a position that are struggling mentally with if and when they should make the leap to go into a similar position or completely switch gears within the benefits space. So help us know what was going through your mind in that part of 2020 when you made that decision.
Oh man, that's a phenomenal question and pretty easy answer for me. On the outside, it would look crazy to add even on top of that layer. So my wife and I had 3.5-year-old at the time when 2020 hit, and she was due with our son, who's now 2.5, March 18th. He was born March 18th, 2020. And I left my company that I was with, big carrier, for 15 years. I left them May 31st of 2020, or June 1st, 2020, right? Middle of COVID.
That's gutsy,
Uh,
man.
right. Outside looking in, it looks crazy. What people don't realize is that I actually wasn't looking for a job. I was happy with what I was doing, but I had this itch. I knew I could do more, and I really liked the not wholesale, but the retail side of getting back in front of the customer and the decision maker and saying, hey, I can provide you with the best of the best. I've got the backing of the best of the best. But I didn't have that. I didn't have that avenue, right? I didn't have the company. And on a whim, a good friend of mine said, hey, I think that carrier you're with and our consulting firm needs to work together, Oklahoma-based company. We've been around since 1927, which is Dillingham Benefits. Come have a conversation with us. And I was egotistical at the time. I said, okay, I'll have a conversation, but it's got to be with the president of the company, because I didn't think it would happen. He says, okay. So he sets it up. We start talking. 20 minutes into our conversation, we both realized we're probably not going to work together as far as the product, carrier wise, consulting wise, but we really liked each other's just aura. And we said that to each other 30 minutes in. And so he said, hey, can you come back in a couple of days? I want to talk to you about a position. I said, what position? So this makes it even better. He goes, well, we're working on one. I want to have the conversation. Great conversation. I've told this story probably 100 times. Just kept the conversation going, met everybody at the company, really loved everything about them. And he goes, hey, I think you've got what it takes. We can teach you how to walk before you run. They needed help on the enhanced benefits side. And they knew that there's a lot of consultants right now that have figured out that we probably need some help, whether we're going to outsource it, working with somebody like you. And this is not a plug for you necessarily, but whether we're going to outsource it,
plug away. It's totally cool.
Or we're going to internalize it. And a lot of times, that cost to internalize it is just too great. So that's where the outsourcing comes in, working with people like Eric. And just the timing fit, the mentality of the company fit, still family run company. And, I went from an employer that had 2,500 employees roughly to 65 employees. And I've loved the last
6,500?
65 employees.
65, like 6'5" total.
6'5", and it's been phenomenal. I love the 15 years I had at the carrier. It taught me a lot. Great company, and it's technically a family-owned private company, even though it's got 2,500 employees. Wouldn't change a day of that. Wouldn't have got to meet you. Wouldn't have got to meet Contorno, some other favorite people. It's one of those things where it just happened all in the right moment. But the thing I would tell people if they're out there listening is, I do think that whether like myself, whether you believe in God, whether you believe in another presence, whether you believe in a mentor, and I'll give a shout out to a good friend of mine named Ron Fields that really well. You know Ron for a long time. I'd called him when I was trying to make this decision. I said, Ron, I feel like it's the right time to leave. And he said, there's no time like today. He goes, if you think it's the right time, he goes, it's always going to be a chance. And you may look back and say, I didn't make the right leap. But if you don't make the leap, you'll never know. You'll be sitting back there. You'll say, I'm still doing what I'm doing. And there's always something to being safe. And I'd been that way for 15 years, even though I'd made leaps in the company I was with. But this was the right time for me, and I've loved every minute of it. I get people all the time to say, hey, have you looked back and thought, should you have done that? Absolutely. I'd do it 100 times over. And again, that's nothing against my previous company. I loved them to death. But man, I absolutely love this side.
Well, in my back in my carrier days, one of the big responsibilities I had, which was I think is a little bit different than what you were in a similar capacity, but I was responsible for hiring, interviewing, hiring, courting, training as many people as I possibly could, literally. Good, better, and different. It's just the model. And I tell you, of the thousands of people that I found, that I was introduced to, or that I found on career builder type websites back in the day, the ones that were the best actual people that I hired, the ones that stuck around the longest, were typically the ones that I met that were never looking. So they were actually, and they were few and far between, but they were the ones that I didn't find on Career Builder. They were the ones that I didn't find on monster.com, or I don't even know if those companies still exist. Nowadays would be like Indeed or whatever. Those are the ones that I was introduced to randomly, or I met randomly in the industry, and just struck up a conversation. When I was able to have a conversation with those folks, that's when lightning in a bottle struck. And those folks, many of which are still in the industry today, maybe they moved around from a different carrier, maybe they're a broker, but frankly, those were always the best. And it sounds like it was a similar thing. It was happenstance. You weren't out there looking. You didn't really have any seeds of discontent. In fact, I talked to you almost every day. So the reality is, I knew how excited and happy you were about your carrier, but timing's everything. And here's the thing, I would say too, Michael, when you got married, were you ready? When you had your first child, were you ready? When you had your second child, were you ready? Right? Nobody's ever ready. I'm no different. And anybody listening, I would argue you're lying to yourself if you say you were ready. Nobody's prepared for any of that. So to say that you're prepared and ready to make a switch, in your case, it just happened. So, what's the old saying in life? When opportunity knocks, do you stare it blindly in the face, or do you answer the door? And dude, you didn't answer the door. You beat that door down and took what was rightfully yours, and you're crushing it. Let me ask you a question. So when your whole background, for the most part, for the better part of 15 years, working in the carrier side of the voluntary benefits world, or as I say, enhanced, your primary job was courting and meeting with brokers and advisors, particularly the latter part of your years there. And yes, sure, you would meet with employers when they needed help, or you would certainly fly out and do what you got to do with a large employer. But the lion's share of your time was spent with brokers. You were a wholesaler. You were trying to convince advisors and brokers why your carrier was the carrier they should put at the top of the list. So talk to me about the contrasting change that's occurred now that you're talking to employers, CFOs, CEOs, CHROs, executives, operations folks. I know you still have many conversations with broker colleagues, but that's the key now. They're colleagues, they're friends, they're people you can pick brains and go back and forth. But talk about anything you learned in the carrier world working with brokers directly that may apply or may not apply to when you're talking to brokers or talking to employers?
Oh man, that's a great question. So one of the things that I always go back to with this is I was in Colorado managing the state in 2008. So I know that sounds like 14 years ago. I
Man,
was
you're
young.
old.
Yeah,
You're
I know.
old.
I think I was 24, 25 at the time. And I was working with a lot of school districts. So I'm working in school districts, for anybody that doesn't know, have large budgets, especially the larger ones. Some have thousands of employees. I had several school districts that had 2,000 to 4,000 employees. So you're talking millions of dollars in budget, and healthcare is a very expensive spend for them. And what I was offering was a very small part. So, like you said, I was working with brokers in those cases. What I did that helped me tremendously, and I didn't think about it at the time, but I would say to anybody that is a carrier rep, figure out how to do this. And this is one of the keys to my success. And a lot of my success is the back office stuff that I have to do a phenomenal job. But is I asked all of those brokers to go to their meetings with them to watch. I didn't necessarily say anything, and I would watch how they interacted with the CFO, with the owner, with the superintendent if it was a school district, with the decision makers, because there is there's a big difference between working with a broker and working with somebody that's having to decide on a $15 million budget and $1 million increase in their health insurance. Right. And again, at the time I was dealing with worksite benefits, but I got to learn the ins and the outs of the medical field in Colorado, Michigan, then working with brokers like David Contorno, right? I got to sit in on meetings with him and learning about captives. I wouldn't have known those things. And had I had not done that, I don't know if I would be as well prepared to jump into the space that I jumped into. So if not that, again, this is a plug for people to move from being a carrier rep to being a consultant, but if you're thinking about it at all, the more time, it's just like anything, the more time you spend learning about it, the better prepared you'll be. And the second part to your question was, how do you prepare yourself to have those conversations with decision makers? I think you really got to go back and look internally at yourself. And if those things, you don't enjoy those and they're not exciting to you to have those big conversations in life in general, right? If you don't want to go buy a car and have the conversation, with the person trying to sell you the car, you just want somebody else to do it for you, this is probably not the line of work for you. I want to be in the front lines and I want to help people to make those decisions that could change the lives of their entire employee base, right? I mean, sometimes it's razor thin that if we can get it right, we can really help somebody that's making $50,000 a year, that they can spend $200 less a month. And that's not always the case, but if you can do it, that's $2,500 a year that they get to take home. That's massive. Not that somebody making 100,000, it doesn't matter too, but I think about those blue collar workers, and that's what drives me every day, is trying to then work with the HR and the CFO and the CEO and saying, what can we do to protect your employees? Because ultimately, I would say 99% of the customers I work with, employers, they care so much about their employees, especially in today's market. I don't know if you noticed this, Eric, but it's so hard to get people hired, right? You were talking
Oh
about
man,
having to hire people. It's
sure.
every one of my clients, with the exception of one. I have one client that they're like, we don't have a problem. We have a waiting list, but they're very specialized, white collar. It's in the medical field. Everybody else, we are trying to get the right people hired. We can't find them. People don't want to work. People don't want to do what they used to want to do for the same amount of money. And so every dollar counts, as well as creating that environment of just that hominess. And no matter if you're a 2,000 life company or 25 life company, you
Sure.
want to create a sense of home for your employees so they don't leave. So that's, you didn't really ask this, but I answered your question and I kind of diverted. That's what drives me every day. And that's what I love about it. And I would say, if you're going to get in this field, you got to have that same love in that respect.
So no, I appreciate that because you're spot on true. I like what you said. Used a car analogy where if you like the idea of talking directly to the sales guy and the sales manager, and you want to talk to her and try to convince her why you should get the best price, and she's going to try to convince you on why you should pay the higher price. If you love that and you're excited about that, then you could certainly thrive in an environment, of course, where you're going direct to market, where you're not a wholesaler. You might be, a term I've heard used is you're more of a retail broker, which
Right.
is great. I've done it both sides of the coins. I love arguing, negotiating with car dealerships. What did I say? I love that, because I'm in the driver's seat and I'm not desperate. I can walk away. Um, I get a little bit of the best of both worlds in my side, but the reality is you're right. If you're more of an order taker, then you may want to just be working within a carrier, send out some quotes, which is great. You can make an incredible living. You know that, we know that,
Right.
but it might not be your line of the work to be able to go out there and cold call, warm market, whatever you got to do to network to get meetings with really busy people, CEOs, CFOs, HR people. They hear from a million different salespeople every day, and you're just going to be another one in the mix. What about the other side? Flip it over, right? Again, a lot of folks that listen to this show that are in the carrier world, they're in the broker world. And what about those folks like you, I imagine, right? You had 15 years in this carrier. I got to imagine that you had other competitive carriers and leadership and managers try to just bring you from one carrier to the other multiple times. Whether or not you met with them, it doesn't matter. I don't care about that. What I'm saying is, was for you personally, was it just the idea of doing something completely different? Meaning, if you were going to move to another carrier, it would still be similar. I don't want to say same old, but maybe it would have been too similar, which maybe is that why you got more excited to go into a new area of the business and learn and develop? You tell me.
That's a great question. What did it for me, and then maybe the stars align, but I would say this to any carrier rep is about, and you were involved in this a little bit more than you probably even think, but probably started end of 2018, 2019. I had, there was about 5 brokers that I worked with all the time, right? Several guys, I won't name them all off, but you guys know who you are, worked with you all the time. And you know this, that you would call and say, hey, I'd like to look at XYZ. I'd like to look at disability for this group. And I would call back and say, hey, we are not the right fit. And I wouldn't try to shove an accident plan down your throat, right? I
No,
would
but
say,
we
hey,
respect that. All the
yeah,
brokers you could mention, that's respectable. We love
yeah.
that.
I would say, hey, you know what? Why don't you look at so and so? Because I
Right.
knew the market. And that's when it clicked for me, was probably end of 2018, first of 2019. I want to eventually do something. And again, this is nothing against the carrier I worked for. We had a ton of
Sure.
partners, but I don't want to be tied down to a product. I want to really be a solution driven person. And that's why I'd always respected you, because you stepped out of it and said, hey, I'm going to work with brokers. I'm going to find the right solution. When the broker comes to me and says, hey, I need X, Y, and Z, you're not stuck to having to offer Aflac, right? Nothing against Aflac or
Any
Colonial or
carrier. That's
whoever.
okay.
Yeah.
I used to be with Aflac. You can
Yeah.
say it. But that's one of the big things
Anyway,
big things for me was I wanted to be agnostic. I needed to be
right.
more independent.
And if you had a solution that needed to be kind of carved out and manipulated, if you only work for a carrier, it may not fit in that box.
Right.
And that's what did it. My old boss at that carrier, her and I had talked about that several times, where she's like, you kind of think outside the box, and it's not always, you're not wanting to not offer what we have to offer, but you're willing to help your broker out, even if we're not getting paid. But what I realized in turn too, and you and I dealt with this several times, because I did that, it also, you guys would come back to me and say, hey, okay, I've got this opportunity. I think you are the right fit. But it really started churning inside of me of going, I want to not be tied down to a carrier. I want to be able to go to any carrier, offer the right solution. And it's happened several times. I've got a client right now where if I was tied to a carrier, even if there's brokers, and I would say this to any broker right now, if you're tied in with one carrier, whether it's medical, dental,
Happens all the
vision,
time.
ancillary, right? Because you get a contingency bonus or whatever it is.
Retention
Really
bonus.
Yep. Start thinking outside the box of, is that what's right for my client? And that was the other reason I came to Dillingham. I'm not plugging Dillingham in this respect, but I would say go find a brokerage firm like this where they continue to say, hey, we want to do what's right for the client, no matter what it does to us. Because at the end of the day, we'll keep the client, even if we make less money, right? We may make less money on this deal, but if it's the right thing to do for them and it's the right solution, which may be an XYZ carrier we hadn't worked with in the past, that's the right thing to do. So that's what did it for me. And that's what I would say any carrier rep right now, and there's nothing wrong with loving the solution that you have. I'm not disrespecting that. But if you have that extra burn inside of you of, I want to have more to offer that, take a look at it. There's a lot of people in the brokerage consulting world that are retiring. We have the baby boomer era that's retiring.
Right.
There's a lot of openings. I mean, I'm giving myself my own competition, so maybe I should not say that.
Well,
But
you're
do it.
spot on. And I have another good friend in the industry, and I'm not going to name names, but his product mix is very minimal. He considers himself a dental and vision nerd. He works for a carrier that's all they're famous for. That's all they do. And he's very quickly, shouldn't say that, he's been there a long time, more than a decade, but slowly but surely been realizing that he may want to have he wants to stay in the carrier world, but he wants to go with a carrier that is more inclusive with programs. So they have a kick-ass dental and vision, but he wants to go with somebody that may also have a really rich DI and life and accident, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So he's asked me that, and I've kind of dove in with him a little bit, and I said, look, is this a little bit of the grass is greener syndrome, where you're thinking and just assuming that you're going to have it made in the shade at the other carrier? Or are you really seeing visually and learning that you're missing opportunities? And for him, it was a little bit of both, but he also said it was more of the latter, in that he's had brokers that he's relied on that love him and vice versa, where they're saying, hey, the employer, they're moving on, not because you were the carrier, but they want it all with one carrier. They want it administratively more functional. They this, they that. So he realizes that he's missing opportunities. And, I can relate to that, because that was one thing that was happening with me. In my world, I was the carrier that had a lot of product. So that wasn't this specific issue. But I started, as the market got more saturated, and it's not saturated, but as it got more, I was losing opportunities, and I realized, geez, I can do what I love. I can do what I'm good at, and then some, but I need to have the ability to represent multiple carriers and products and solutions in the market. Otherwise, I'm going to continue to lose business. So I'm glad you touched on it. I just wanted to make sure we brought it up. Now, what about this? Talk about, do you believe in the following phrase? I've heard people say the riches are in the niches, right? The riches are in the niches. So, as a broker, as an advisor, a consultant, do you have right now, I know you're still relatively new, a few years in, but do you personally believe in focusing on verticals, i.e. all construction, all electricians, all plumbers, all lawyers, all doctors? I'm just curious, because I've had a lot of advisors and partners that I've met over the years, where if you look at their book, they have 50 accounts, they're pretty large, and 40 of them are all in the same vertical, which they think makes it easier to continue getting that or growing that vertical. What's been your thought so far? How do you approach that?
Man, the timing couldn't be better on that question. I know we didn't prep anything before this, but it's funny you asked that, because my background's fairly unique in that the company I worked for, the carrier, we had three niches. We had school districts, what was called worksite, which was really municipalities and auto dealerships. And then we had brokerage, which was the side you and I worked, where I could work directly with brokers. So I worked in the school district side forever, then worked on the brokerage side, where I worked with brokers that don't have niches. And so I knew niches really well. And Dillingham, who I work for, technically has no niches. We have certain verticals that have just happened on our property and casualty side and then on the benefits side. But I think a little bit of that is, and I've spent the last year and a half really thinking hard about this. So I'll use my internal book right now. I've got construction companies, right? I think I've got 5 construction companies. I've got school districts that we do the medical for. I've got some doctors' offices. I've got an aerospace company that, is just kind of outside the box. I've got I got a company that does gutters, right? So you would think more blue collar, but they've got actually a lot of white collar internal people. So I think that you can get into niches, and let me kind of take a step back. If you look at Oklahoma, so I think you have to look at where you're geographically located. We have a lot of
Oklahoma. Is that one of those flyover states?
I knew you were going to say that. I knew that was coming up. good old, what was that, Jason Aldean that sang that or somebody? Oil and gas, right, is massive in Oklahoma. And I think I only have 2 oil and gas companies. Now, our firm has several oil and gas companies, but when you look at our firm, we've got several white collars. So we've actually spent several executive meetings talking about what do we want to focus on with niches. And to your point, to your question, I think there's something comfortable about saying, okay, well, I know how schools operate, right? And I know what type of solutions that are going to work better for them, what risk tolerance is going to look like for them. I think it fits probably more
Well,
on the P&C side.
I think that's the key, though, what you just talked about, knowing them really intimately, right? So, like
Right.
when I was growing up in the business, I tried my best. I should say when I was direct to market, when I was in leadership and management, it didn't matter. Frankly, I just wanted every group in the imaginable.
Right.
But I tried really hard because I did see, and I do believe it is. Let's say easier. Nothing's easy, but it's probably a little more simple to garner appointments and to get engagement and maybe even close deals when you can speak that language. You know, I have a good broker friend, Cam Cummings, who
Oh,
out
yeah.
of Michigan.
I
You
love
know
Cam.
Cam, right?
Yeah. Love
And
him.
he has some random groups, but his focus and specific laser-like focus is in one set industry. I won't give it away, but the reality, and actually it's public, it's on his LinkedIn, but the
Yeah.
reality is he talked on stage about it at a Benefits Pro conference recently. I don't know if it was this past year or the previous, but he said how he can speak the language. It's almost as if he works there. Like he's talking to a CFO, he's talking to HR. He knows everything and anything about that specific vertical and industry to the point where any other broker that is competing for that business, they're coming in and they can't talk the talk. They can't speak the speak. So I think it's important if you can get that. I don't think you can get that by having 2 electrical contractors. I think it's going to take more than that
Right.
over time. But
Yep.
the reality is, I think it's oftentimes something that newer sales reps in carriers and even brokerages miss out on when they try to attack the market with the old spaghetti method, throw as much to the
Oh,
wall and see what sticks.
I
That's
agree.
why I wanted you to talk about it.
Well, and the only thing I would add to it is I agree with what you're saying, and I would add that if you're new in the industry, look at where you came from. Whether this is most people, this isn't their first job out of college. So look at what you did, like growing up. Like my granddad owned a pool company, so I knew about building pools. I'd worked with him over the summer. Well, I knew what suppliers it
Right.
took to build those pools, right? And then my uncle he provides big construction equipment. Now, what's funny is I haven't used him a bunch, but I do have a decent sized construction book. The other thing that I would say to it is once you get a couple, to Cam's point, you start learning and you start learning their needs too, right? Like construction company, there's a big difference between general contractor and actually fully integrated. But if you start knowing those people, you also start getting referrals in that area,
Yep.
right? So you work with one and you got to take great care of them. If you take great care of them, then they're willing to refer you and say, hey, they take great care of me. You should take a look at them because they're all meeting for industry meetings, right? They're having construction contractors association meetings or oil and gas association or aerospace, right? Aerospace is actually, this is just a side note. So aerospace is the largest, fastest growing sector in Oklahoma. So oil and gas has been predominant in Oklahoma forever, right? So this is what I would implore you to do because most people work geographically. Even though I've got several out-of-state clients, I look at aerospace as the fastest growing industry in Oklahoma. And Oklahoma is 2/3 dominated by oil and gas companies. I mean, that's just what we are in Oklahoma. In the next 10 years, Eric, aerospace will top revenue for oil and gas. So think about how fast that's growing. Aerospace defense contractors. So I'm spending a lot of time on aerospace companies coming in because I know 4 CEOs of aerospace companies. So I pick their brain on what are you guys looking for? What type of employees do you want? But I would say you have to be a master of your craft. That's something I've always appreciated about you. I've appreciated about Susan Combs, and Susan, does a lot on the speaking circuit. Andy Neary, who I thought was a phenomenal broker and now is a motivational speaker and teaches insurance reps how to be better at what they do. Like you, and obviously Contorno, I give him a hard time, but you 4 always wanted to be masters at your craft, at what you were doing and learning more and more and more. And quite frankly, you were the 4 that convinced me that I could come and do this and do it at a higher level than probably what I ever thought I could. So that was just a side note but it
Well,
tailed into what you were asking.
no, I appreciate it, and I think it's important. And like I said, we have a variety of folks that listen to the show, and I just wanted to give them something different, a different perspective to listen to. I look back at the last, I don't know, couple handfuls of episodes, and I know because I look back at it, we hadn't gotten into some of these types of details with other guests, so I knew you'd be a perfect fit for it. Let me ask you something kind of odd as we start to wind down. Maybe not odd, but I want to see if there's a parallel. So, unlike at least for me asking, unlike most or many of the guests that I've had on the show, we're nearing 100 episodes at this point. I don't want to say you're the only one, but you're probably one of the few hunters that I've had on the show. Folks that are, if you're watching on YouTube, this guy's a stud. He's got custom tailored suit on. He's got this old man beard with gray hair. But I tell you what, when he's not dressed up to the nines trying to sell insurance and benefits and give advice, he's decked out in camo and holding a rifle. So my question is not so much about hunting, excuse me, but is there, or have you ever found there to be a parallel between what it takes to be a hunter, to enjoy that sport, versus or in parallel to sales? Forget benefits, forget insurance, forget the carrier world, forget brokerage, just in general, sales skills and sales development and mental development with hunting. Talk to me about some parallels off the top of your head that you might be able to put together.
Oh man, you know this. I can go on all day about hunting, but
And I'm no hunter, obviously.
Yeah.
I don't know if you saw. I think I sent you the picture. I went clay pin shooting, and I had fun. I hit 11 targets out of like 180 that day. It's not very good, but I enjoyed it. I was hoping to hit one, and man, did I have the bruise of all bruises. So I am not a marksman. Let me just say that. So go ahead.
Well, no. So you ask a phenomenal question, and it's funny. I'll start with this. Whether you believe in hunting animals or not, I won't spend time talking about that.
And I didn't ask about part. That's a whole nother world. Forget that.
I don't want people to tune out because I think there is an absolute direct parallel, and it doesn't have to just be with hunting. So you can take the words I'm going to use, but I think people need to figure this out. If they're in sales, they need to have a different avenue that they can still hone their skills to where they can be the most effective person possible. And here's the parallel for me. So I am an avid archer. there's 365 days in a year. I probably spend 250 shooting my bow. So I went from, and I very rarely shoot a rifle. And I will tell you why. I realized that you can be more accurate and closer to, you have to be closer to the game, and you have to be more accurate if you're going to ethically shoot something, whatever you're hunting, right? And the only way to do that is with a bow. And people that know me know I own, and especially my friends, several bows, but I spend a ton of time learning about archery. I spend a ton of time surrounding myself. And I think this will be the key takeaway you need to take away from this. I spend 7 days a year in person with the top archers that I know in the country. And I invite them down to my land in Oklahoma, and we spend 7 days and we bow hunt. In the end of December, we bow hunt, and it's invitation only. We spend a lot of time giving each other grief, but we have archery targets, so not hunting, every night where we have tournaments. And if you want to go to a particular place to hunt the next day, you got to win that tournament that night. And we're honing our skills, but we're talking all year. We have a group text, Eric, and all year, some days it has 50 texts, some days it has 2. But we're talking about, hey, did you guys see this? Did you see this that happened? Look at my shot. What am I doing wrong? The best example I'll give is one of my best friends who lives here with me. We own land together. He's a great bow hunter. He won't tell you he is, but he had what's called the yips, right? We get them in sales when we get a lot of no's.
In baseball too, man. You can't throw the ball to second base.
That's exactly right, right?
Or the catcher can't throw it to the pitcher.
Maybe the Oreos dealt with that.
Oh, come on, man.
Sorry,
You're right, though. The yips is real. Keep going.
Right. It happens in sales, and he got it. We know what he did is one of the guys in our group said, hey, you need to check out this podcast. Watch it for 4 weeks. And it sounds weird, podcast with archery. He watched it. He just killed the biggest deer of his life, which again, it's not about that, because he was sound. He spent 2 months relearning his craft.
Sure.
I think that's the biggest thing in any type of sales, but especially in the world we live in, is once you get outside of this, you have so much other time to do anything. If all you're doing is just sitting on your booty and doing nothing else, whether you run marathons, whether you like to get up and walk and just hone what you're doing, right? Get on your Peloton treadmill that you have. Figure something to do, whether it's with your kids, but hone that craft and learn how to be the best. And maybe that's my passion. Like, I want to be the best at something I'm going to do.
You're right.
I think that's the only way you can be successful. So if you're not successful in sales, I think look inside and say, well, what am I doing when I'm outside of sales? You don't have to do sales. Do something else, but it'll totally. I can go on for an entire
No,
episode.
you're
how it
totally spot
correlates.
on, and that's why, you know it from when I met you. I and many of our advisor colleagues and partners and friends, we spend literally multiple tens of thousands of dollars, if not more. Some folks even over 100 grand a year, to go to various conferences throughout the year and continue to train and bring in speakers and trainers to train our team. That's the key. So I like how you frame that, and I like how you said it. Because I think it's spot on. And that was not at all what I had in mind from a parallel perspective, because I didn't know what you would say, but I think how you tied that together makes total sense. So listen, in our last couple minutes here, and we're as we wrap up, lightning round, right? Give me 1 or 2 minutes on a loss, not a win, a loss. You don't have to be naming names and stuff, but a loss in the carrier world specifically, and then a loss in the brokerage side thus far early on in your career. Talk about those losses individually if you can, and what it taught you, because I think that's the lesson I want people to take away as we finish this up.
Absolutely. I love it. And I think you only learn if you really go and digest your losses. If you glaze over them, you don't learn anything. So I'll give you two. One, in the carrier world, I will tell you exactly where I was, time and place. I was newer manager in in Colorado. I was young, and largest account I'd ever dealt with. And I thought we had it. I knew the CFO. I didn't know the HR person very well. And she said, yep, we'll take a look at you. And then I got a call on the phone. I got back to my office and said, hey, we want you to come on board. And they had another person involved. So this will be the thing to take away. Another broker. It was actually their broker that was involved. It was Mercer at the time. And nothing against Mercer. They're great. And they basically knew, though, my play. I couldn't get enrollers to get there in the time span they were going to give me. So they gave me that time span. They said, you have 30 minutes to tell us yes or no. I had to call back and say, well, we can't do that. We need to find a different time. So they fired us. So we never got the account. The lesson learned there for me was I should have done, again, my homework on knowing the relationships and the politics at play. And I would say the larger the account is, the more politics that are always at play.
Oh, for sure.
To know the players in the room and know the players that aren't in the room that are really probably making the decisions. And if I would have known that, I would have went and had side meetings with those people, said, what's it going to take? What's the right angle? It ended up being a great thing. And there's a longer story I can tell, but that taught me early on in my career, that lesson. Fast forward, my first big loss. I've been very fortunate since I've moved over to Dillingham. I haven't had too many. We kind of have a system in place of how we vet out clients, pre-clients. But I had one that happened last year, and it still hurts. And it was a large group down in Texas, 800 and something lives. They were kind of a conglomerate of 3 companies that joined. And I was excited it's a unique thing to take 3 companies and figure out their benefits and get it to all work. And it was private equity backed. Realized now, having looked back, and I spent probably 2 months, Eric, after we got that loss. So you don't know this, but it's 6.5 hour drive down to Midland, Texas. Did that 3 times for 3 meetings. Realize, again, not only did we probably not have all the players in the room, and it's a phenomenal company. I think there's still opportunities there with the company. I might not be the right person for it. We've got other people at our firm that could probably do a better job. And that's the other thing I would say is admit when you know you're not the right person. I look back and think like, should have taken more time, should have seen again, goes back to the first lesson, all the players in the room, all the politics at hand. Probably didn't have an opportunity, even though we thought we did. So we put our best foot forward, but sometimes it's timing and being in the right place, and it's knowing the right people and the relationship. There's nothing wrong with that. People seem to shy away from that nowadays. And I think that's what I've learned from my losses is it's okay to have the right relationship. You're not you don't need to use it as a bad thing. Use it as an appropriate thing of, hey, I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to make sure you're taken care of. And if you mean that and you truly can do it, then that's right. So I would say my losses have been not knowing all the players. And at that point, I was done before I started. So I should have known better. And I think you got to know that. And I think you got to go back and do your research. So I don't know if that answers your question, but.
No, man, that's perfect. I wanted to hear it. I was curious, so that way I can make fun of you later. I mean, so that way we can learn from those mistakes. No, with all seriousness, no. We could all write books. Those listening to this podcast, myself, you, we could write books on various losses, whether personal or our firm or our carrier or our or colleagues, stories we've heard. So no, man, look, I appreciate you coming on. I've wanted to have you on for a while. And for those that want to contact Michael, you can certainly send him a message on LinkedIn. You can reach out to him. If you hit me up in the comments, you'll see him there as well on any social media where you see this posted. Michael, man, it's my pleasure, man. It's been fun. I love chatting with you as always. I know we chat often anyway, but I'm excited for folks to have listened to you and hopefully glean some knowledge. What do you got? We're recording this at the end of October, so that big December hunting event with the boys is coming up. I'm sure it's already planned or about to be finished up planning, right?
We're in the process of planning it, and I just got back from my annual Colorado elk hunt where I ride mules up to the top of the mountain. We didn't get an elk. Nobody in the group got an elk. But we rode mules up to the top of the mountain every day. And
but that's a lesson right there, because you don't always, and yet every single year you invest time and lots of money to go out there and have some fun and learn from each other. So for everybody listening to today's show, I appreciate you listening. If you have any questions, thoughts, ideas, comments, please put them in the section below. If you haven't already subscribed, please subscribe wherever you're consuming today's show. And look, I couldn't do this on my own. I just show up and ask some dumb questions. I hope they're not dumb, but I sometimes think they're dumb. So for everybody behind the scenes at the Rockstars Rocking podcast, I'm Eric Silverman. That's Michael Hart, and we'll see you next week. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, sir.
Thanks so much for tuning into this episode of the Rockstars Rocking podcast. If you haven't done so already, make sure you're subscribed to the show wherever you consume podcasts. And if you feel so inclined, please leave us a review. 5 stars would totally rock. Until next time, Rockstars, keep rocking.